Thank you for that unauthorized introduction, Cyrus. That was great. I have a ton of slides, so I am just going to dive right in. Try to blow through about 90 slides in 25 minutes. This is kind of an outline of what I plan to talk about. Give you a quick sense of where we stand with local search in July 2013. Dive into tactics along 3 of the major ranking criteria that Google is using. And finish with a quick end-to-end local roadmap, kind of an order of operations that your organization can follow. So here's where we stand. Basically, about 1 in 3 searches has what's called local intent, people looking for a local business, driving directions, maps, weather, news, et cetera. And that number is even bigger on mobile. As you've seen already at this conference on about 18 different presentations, mobile is exploding. It's up to somewhere around 20 to 30% of all searches right now. Yelp and some of the other sites in the local space report numbers even higher than that. Mobile search in India is already exceeding desktop search, so mobile is just exploding, right? And as GED Matt Brown highlighted yesterday, we're now starting to see knowledge graph results like the local carousel, which started out being displayed on mobile, now influencing Google's desktop interface. So mobile is really where Google is headed. And just to kind of reiterate Matt's presentation from yesterday, each of these local businesses is basically a semantic entity now for display in things like Google Glass. As you can see, my buddy Matt McGee was one of the early testers of Google Glass. So this is really where Google's headed. Local is mobile for Google. And so the algorithm, consequently, as Google has moved from 10 blue links into this more semantic local entity model, the algorithm has gotten much more complex. And I actually did a Whiteboard Friday a few weeks back that I'd encourage you to check out that kind of goes through this evolution in a little bit more detail. But where we stand today, I'll give you a quick little preview of my annual local search ranking factors survey, which I sent out about 2 weeks ago and will be published on the Moz blog in about 2 more weeks. The algorithm, as I said, is very complex today. And I think we've seen a similar graphic from Dr. Matt about the traditional algorithm at Google being similarly complex these days. But the numbers I want you guys to pay attention to on here are the place page signals, citation signals, and review signals. These are factors unique to local search, and collectively they make up almost 50% of the algorithm. So local really is a different beast if you're trying to rank either your business or your clients' businesses in local at Google. And I asked a little bit of a different question format this year. One of the questions I asked was to compare desktop ranking factors and mobile ranking factors in local. And interestingly enough, whoops, that was not me. Interestingly enough, the influence of mobile behavior on mobile local rankings was only about a 2.5% difference. So that pink triangle represents things like clicks to call, clicks for driving directions, et cetera. Only made about a 2.5% difference. So the gist of this slide is really Google seems to be using largely the same algorithm today on desktop as they do on mobile when it comes to local search. And this is, I think, a really interesting data point, and I expect that pink slice to grow considerably more as Google starts taking into account more and more mobile ranking signals in the coming years. I also asked my survey participants to stack rank the ranking factors a little bit differently this year. On the left, you see the responses to a question I asked, which is, pretend you're working with a small business who's just getting started in local search, what are the top 20 things you think are most influential for that business to rank? And on the right, competitive rankings, a client who's already done a lot of the foundational work, what are the difference makers for these guys in competitive markets? I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this slide. It's available, obviously, after the show's over and when the study gets published. But at a very high level, basically the foundation is all about quantity, getting your citation information consistent as many places as possible, getting as many reviews as possible. And as we move into more competitive markets, again, like Dr. Matt spoke about yesterday in traditional ranking factors, quality signals, authority signals really start to play a much bigger role on links, reviews, and citations. The rest of my presentation, that was kind of a high-level piece. The rest of my presentation I want to get much more tactical because I know that that's probably what most of you are here for. A quick caveat that I haven't done a lot of consulting in the last 12 to 18 months. I've been focused exclusively on Get Listed and everything we're doing at Moz now. But this is kind of what I would do if I were consulting for a company today. So I'm going to ask for a little bit of help from Indiana Jones, borrowing on a latest Solus theme from yesterday. Kick things off with a few organic tactics at scale. So in local, really, this is the holy grail of what you're looking to do. Wait for the reference on the next slide. Really, you're trying to establish a three-way connection between website, location, and brand. The words in blue are the tactics for how to get there, right? So to establish the connection between location and brand, that's your feed into Google Places for Business. Website and brand, you're really looking at Google Plus, author, and publisher markup. The website location connection is the one that I think a lot of big companies fall down on with either a poor store locator, weak site architecture, or not uploading a KML file. But this is very scalable. This is really the first place I recommend larger companies start. And as I said, the place that these guys fall down is that they go for these really fancy store locators that are either trying to sniff location or asking users to enter a zip code or using only a map interface, things like that. And when you implement a fancy store locator, oh man, this is what the results tend to look like. If you guys remember this scene, you're kind of hosed when it comes to local search. So stick with something simpler, a much better mantra, just as Indiana chose wisely. So the REI store locator, I think, is a great example. They have a very sort of interactive map interface, but they provide this traditional directory structure alongside that map interface. And the key is, I don't know if you can see it at the bottom, but the key is REI has a unique page for each store location. And this is really, really critical, again, for Google to latch on to that website location connection. My UX and design team is currently clawing their eyes out looking at this slide. This is a very technical wireframe for what I recommend a location page look like. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on it, but if you want to take this and show this to your development team, this is what I'd recommend at a technical level that each of these store location pages have. And that's really, again, how you get that three-way connection going between website, location, and brand. And if you do, that should cure a lot of the pain that you might be having in local results at Google. Taking organic tactics to the next level, focus a little bit on content generation. This is not only from a user experience standpoint. Once someone lands on that store location page, you want them to have a great experience with local content, personalized content, but also from a ranking standpoint. So those of you who followed that Venice update closely from Google last year, you know that Google is now showing a lot of what we call localized organic results. So web results that are specific to a geographic area. And so you really need to focus a lot more heavily on this unique local content. And the way not to do it would be to outsource it to Indian slave labor, like the guys in the Temple of Doom. You want to get a lot more creative at building this local content at scale. And I recommend starting with three places when you're trying to scale this out. Obviously, managers and business owners, to the extent you can get them to engage and create this content, all the better. Your customers and also technology. So let's take a little bit deeper look. Really, I feel like every manager or store owner should be able to write his or her own 200-character description of that branch, that business. This will not only get you something you can submit via the bulk feed to Google Places for Business, but it's a nice kind of tagline, intro teaser at a high level when people land on that location page. A lot of managers and business owners as well, of course, they get writer's block when they look at a blank computer screen. So I'd recommend prompting them. Aaron Weike has a great tip. Have them answer the whatever number, 2, 3, 7, 10 most commonly asked questions they get at their store, just to get some of that personal, unique, local content on those pages. And also look at pulling from Facebook. A lot of store managers do a great job updating their local Facebook page, even if they're not updating either their website through HTML or WordPress or whatever, or a more complex CMS at a corporate brand. So this is an example from my local Patagonia store in Portland. I'm a big fan of the brand, big fan of the store. They do a great job of showing local events from charities they're involved with, to their leaderboard for their bike to work competition. Really great content here on their Facebook page. But you go to their location page and it looks like my technical wireframe. It's very dull, it's bland, it has all the key information from a technical standpoint, but without much personality. It's like Molaram came around and just ripped the heart right out of that page. And so it's really not the best experience for a user once they land on this page, and they're also not capturing a lot of the long tail search traffic that they could be if they were imbuing this with a little more personality. So I'd encourage you guys to set up a feed to pull in open graph photos from a Facebook page, get the publishing mechanism integrated with your CMS, but you really want to get some of that personality that store managers are already putting out there on social media right there on the main page. Customers are also a great source of content. You can look at Facebook to see who are your active commenters. If you're a more sort of loyalty-driven retail business like a coffee shop or something, you might ask those guys to come in for interviews or get them over email. It's a really great way to kind of build out that unique content, imbue it with local personality. Darren Shaw gave a great presentation at SearchFest in February down in Portland about reclaiming filtered Yelp reviews. So if you're not familiar with this technique, Yelp obviously has a very aggressive review filter to prevent spam, but it filters out a lot of legitimate reviews left by sort of less sophisticated, less technology savvy customers. This is actually from a former client of mine, Joanne Rollins. You can see she's got 3 live Yelp reviews and 13 filtered ones down there at the bottom left. Not an uncommon scenario for a lot of small business owners. And so these reviews are not ending up in anyone's index. You actually have to fill out a CAPTCHA to get to this page. And so we've kind of repurposed those after asking for permission from all of these reviewers right there on her website, just to give her a little bit more long tail content to hopefully pull in some of that local organic traffic. You can also use technology. There's a great article posted on Street Fight Mag actually just last week that got some of my creative juices flowing anyway. You can mash up some really cool map content. This is a map pulling from a code base on GitHub that shows the location of all the tweets in Portland on an ongoing basis. So you can have this technology kind of continuously updating your content for you without ongoing involvement. There's a lot of great open data sources out there these days. Check out the vendor Socrata, which provides data services to a lot of government entities. There's also ProPublica, the Census Bureau, data.gov, a lot of great open data sources to think about some of these geographic mashups. But don't just present them as an iframe or as right there on a Google map. Think about creative ways to put this together. That's what's going to lead to people engaging with this on a very active basis, get them to share it on social media, et cetera. Travel and Leisure did a great job of this. Of course they did a great job, right? I mean, Portland beat Seattle in this competition, which, as we all know, Portland is the best of the Northwestern cities. So Travel and Leisure does a great job with this. And I would encourage you guys to think in a similar manner. Rand, I know you didn't like that. I told you it was coming. So I'd encourage you guys to think in a similar manner about presenting this kind of content. And that should hopefully be sort of a natural bridge to your link building strategy, creating this share-worthy content on a scalable basis. You shouldn't have to do any ongoing link building for your clients or for your own organization. If you do sort of want a low-hanging fruit idea, one technique that I've seen that's worked really well, creating, you probably already have these discount programs set up for key partners, and getting them set up with local colleges and universities can go a long way. Here's a great, not only citation, but also a link from Northwestern to the North Face's Wildcard student discount program. University of Texas San Antonio has a great page for vendors that give discounts to their employees. So some really great low-hanging link sources for programs that you may already have in place. And if you're looking for ideas for other ways to get these high-quality, high-authority links and citations, one of my favorite searches that I haven't seen too many people present before, do a custom search for the educational, primary and secondary ed TLDs, k12.oregon.us, and see what other companies are doing to get these links and citations from local school districts. Okay, moving on to citation tactics now. If you guys haven't heard the term citation before, it's essentially a mention of your brand associated with a location. So the idea is that you want your name, address, your phone number to stand out in the crowd of other businesses across the web, just like Marcus Brody is here in the Egyptian Bazaar. And so this is kind of how this concept of citations works. Google will get data from three primary aggregators in this country, Infogroup, Axiom, and Newstar Localese. These three primary data aggregators also feed data to a number of secondary sites like the Internet Yellow Pages services, some of the more sort of social local plays like Foursquare. And then Google, with all its robots, goes out and crawls these sources, and they try to match that information that you've given them via the Places for Business feed with all of these other sites across the web. Basically, the more matches they find, the more trust they have in your information, the higher you're likely to rank. So these are the common questions that I get in terms of citations. Which of those big three should I use if I've only got budget for one of them? And then what are the biggest changes that I've seen in the last X number of months? So I put these graphics together to help you guys identify, if you do only have budget for one of the aggregators, kind of what their strengths and weaknesses are. Infogroup, I think, has the most direct line into Google's business index. They also syndicate to a number of important secondary sites like Yahoo, CitySearch, Superpages. Newstar Localese has a little bit bigger reach. They send to a lot more sort of secondary players. And they also send data to both Apple Maps and Facebook. So if those are big pain points for your clients or your organization, Newstar could be a good option. Axiom is still listed as a data provider to Google on its terms of service page for maps. They also send data to Yelp and Apple Maps. So all three of them kind of have their own strengths and weaknesses. In terms of what I see as as sort of the biggest change, the newest player on the scene, that's a company called Factual. And Factual, especially for international markets, has a pretty strong data set that I think is sort of indirectly working its way into Google's ecosystem. They feed Yelp, Foursquare, TripAdvisor, Apple, some of the more sort of Web 2.0, Web 3.0 companies. In terms of niche citations, so this is really, according to the survey experts, this is really what's going to put you over the top in these competitive markets. And here's kind of a quick checklist for a process you can use to identify high-quality niche citations. Pull a list either from Whitespark or the MozBar. I'll show you how to do that on the next slide. Get that into Excel and basically do some fancy sorting to pull out the really key sources that are unique, high quality, that are really going to put you over the top. So basically, Whitespark, if you haven't heard of it, is a paid service from Darren Shaw. I mentioned it earlier. Darren will sort of crawl Google search results, look at where the top competitors showing up for given keywords are listed, and show you basically in order which sites are sort of most frequent in terms of the sites that show these competitors. You can also do the same thing yourself. If you type in one of these competitors' full NAP information, name, address, phone number, directly into the search bar, you can use the MozBar then to export that list to CSV and do some of this filtering yourself. So you end up with something that looks like this, and then going through and finding the .orgs, the .edus, the school district type domains will show you where these really high quality niche citations are occurring. And I just did this for a friend of mine who runs a local furniture store in Portland. Found some of her competitors on really important sites like this Northwest Society for Interior Designers, kind of the trade group for a lot of practitioners in Portland. Some great neighborhood sites like this neighborhood in Gresham, which is a little bit outside of her market, but maybe she could do a guest exhibit there or something along those lines. If you're looking to scale this out a little bit more, one thing you can do is host a lot of events at your business or your clients, encourage your clients to host them at their businesses. A lot of times the people putting on those events will do the work for you in terms of marketing and include your name, address, phone number, where the event is going to be held. So this is an example of my local REI shop hosting an event for Doctors Without Borders that put it on Eventbrite and Eventful. And even Patagonia, although their store page is a little bit weak, as I mentioned, they do kind of a similar technique with yoga classes, and they're getting this great citation. You can see their address, 907 Northwest Irving Street. in the Oregonian, which is our major newspaper in Portland. So hosting events can be a great way to kind of scale out your citation building. Moving on to review tactics, one of my favorite scenes from Raiders of the Lost Ark, I think, the I love you on the eyelids, which stopped Indy cold in his tracks. So this is the typical review process, right? It's very cumbersome. It has a lot of friction. It's not surprising that business owners find it so hard to get reviews from customers. It's like 8 steps. People have to fill out a confirmation email after they create an account, all that stuff. You want to streamline that. You want to not only send the user a direct link to your profile page on these review sites, but look at the email addresses associated with the people that you're sending these requests to. If they have a Gmail account, I recommend sending them to Google. They can just leave the review on the spot. If they don't have a Gmail account, send them to a site that will accept a Facebook login. Pretty much everybody on the planet has a Facebook login these days. And so sending a direct link to those sites will streamline that process and make sure that as much friction as possible is removed from the process. Review authority was also identified as one of the up-and-coming ranking factors. So getting reviews from people who leave a lot of reviews of all kinds of businesses. And so this is one way I've found to find authority reviewers on Yelp. Basically, this very complicated custom search is trying to find me Yelp users who have taken the time to set up a custom profile, who have been elite at any time. So Yelp has this elite designation for people who leave a lot of reviews, and who are located in Portland. This string will lead to some false positives, but in general, the people that you find on this list have these very detailed profiles. You can see exactly what they're into. Often they list their own blog or sometimes directly their Twitter handle that you can go and engage with them. You don't want to just go out and solicit them for reviews, right? You don't want to be the guy at the party who's like going around glad-handing, giving people business cards. But you want to develop real relationships with these people. As so many speakers at MozCon have gone over, it really is about relationships in this new digital marketing era. You can also use a tool that we have at Moz that several people have mentioned as well, Follower Wonk. Find authority reviewers using Follower Wonk by seeing who follows the Yelp community managers, right? Anybody who knows about the Yelp community managers is probably a pretty active Yelper. And then you can see which of those people is also following competitors of yours, and then plug that into Follower Wonk. So this is kind of what that looks like. You can see the big green circle is people in Portland or people anywhere, I guess, who are following the Yelp Portland Community Manager. The 2 smaller circles are for typical small businesses who are competitors of my friend, the furniture store owner. And believe it or not, there's an overlap of about 14 Twitter handles who are following one of those competitors and this Yelp guy. And so this is a list I would set up as a custom stream in my Hootsuite deck or whatever social management tool I'm using, and really make sure that I know what makes these people tick. I retweet their stuff, I cross-promote their content, develop a real relationship with these people, and hopefully then they'll come in and patronize your business and eventually leave a review. All right, so that's a lot in about 23 minutes. In the last 2 minutes, I'm going to hopefully kind of parse it out into a more concrete roadmap that I can recommend that you put in place. So as I said at the beginning, you really need to set that foundation first. You got to make sure that you have a solid store locator, good on-page experience at a technical level, straighten up your data feeds with both Google Places and those primary aggregators. This is kind of the no-brainer. Everyone needs to do this before they even get started with anything else. Then you can look at analyzing your competition, use Open Site Explorer or any other tool to analyze your backlink profiles of your competitors. Do some of the things I mentioned on citation research and review sources, especially among people who are located far from the city center, right? So they're overcoming one of these sort of weird biases that Google has to show businesses that are located close to downtown higher in the search results. The folks who are doing really well despite being out in the suburbs, those are the guys you want to pay attention to. How many reviews do they have? Where are they getting their reviews from? What sites are they getting reviewed on? Where are they getting cited, et cetera? And so do that competitive analysis. Then you want to create the quantity I mentioned earlier, get that foundation layer set up with Internet Yellow Pages citations, events, et cetera. get some of these review campaigns going with some of your better customers, segment the Gmail accounts from everyone else. After you've got kind of that baseline of quantity, that's when you can move on and really focus on quality. When I'm talking about in-store experience, I mean in-store, right? You want to make sure that people, well, this slide already advanced anyway, you want to make sure that those authority figures, those elite reviewers, have a good experience in your store because what they say is going to be incredibly powerful, not only for rankings, but for conversion. So after you've got kind of that quality in-store experience, the personal content on the page, that's when you go out and engage these authority figures on Twitter, on their blogs, cross-promoting their content, and generally being a good citizen on the web. And so that's kind of your local roadmap. In my experience, most companies who are new to local are probably somewhere between the steps 1 and 2. So really focus on that foundation before you move on to some of those more advanced kind of one-to-one techniques. But it can be very hard to scale local. I hope that this gives you a little bit of a roadmap for how to get there. So thanks very much. And hopefully this roadmap leaves you like Indy and Willie in the Indian Children Village, and that the children are your clients. So thank you very much.
Thank you, David. That was awesome. So you've been surveying local search experts for a long time, doing local search ranking factors for many years. In the last year or two, what would you say is the biggest change that you've seen? The way Google and the local search landscape is changing.
Sure. To me, the interface has been the biggest change, right? I don't know that most of us on the local search ranking factors panel have seen that many algorithmic changes over the last couple years. I think that the knowledge graph, what we used to call the authoritative one box, now it's knowledge graph. The way Google is displaying 7-pack results, how they're creating those 7-pack results. Mike Blumenthal gave a great presentation at Search Love earlier this year that you might want to check out on that. I think it's mostly an interface thing and trying to figure out where Google's headed next with the interface more than the algorithm. I think the algorithm is pretty well established.
All right, looks like we got 3 questions. You're going to try to get to all of them? Yes.
Hi. How do you deal with citations in countries that aren't supported by what you showed there? Like, for example, like Whitespark and GetListed don't support Mexico.
Sure. So what I'd recommend there is doing searches for pick out 5, 10, a dozen, 2 dozen keywords. Use that MozBar and see the most commonly occurring domains that are showing up for all of those keywords. And figure out which sites Google is looking at for that industry. And that's where you need to get cited. That's kind of a proxy for who Google's major data aggregators are, data providers. They may not be getting data from those guys directly, but at the very least, they're crawling those sites with a high degree of trust in the information that's presented there.
Thanks.
Yes.
Hi, David. I was wondering if you'd looked at the data quality of any of the 3 core data providers and Factual, and if you could kind of rank them in terms of which ones have the cleanest databases and which one you should do the most work in kind of cleaning up and
Sure.
deduping what they have already.
Sure. So it's a little bit of it's an interesting question. They all, I guess, in my experience, the sort of dirtiest data tends to come from businesses that are multiple practitioners at the same location. So for instance, things like doctors, lawyers, dentists, et cetera. All 3 of them have different rules for what information they will accept from practitioners. And so that's kind of my experience of dirty data. I think it's hardest to clean those things up at Infogroup. I don't necessarily think that means Infogroup has the dirtiest data. I'm probably not the guy to ask for like accuracy of listings. There are plenty of third-party studies on that. But I think it's, in terms of like what's hardest to clean up, my experience has been Infogroup. I think Axiom's data probably takes the longest to get to market, and Localese is kind of somewhere in the middle of both of those. So Factual, I think, they're, as I said, they're kind of new on the scene. I'm not sure how trusted their data is by Google in particular, but just the fact that they've become the de facto data source for a lot of startups and mobile applications makes them important.
Thank you.
Yes.
Great job, David. Quick question. How should we handle citation building for service area businesses and locations that hide their address?
Sure. Basically, you're going to have the discussion with your clients about how this whole process works. If they're not willing to invest in some sort of physical location in the market they want to serve, they're going to be SOL on place listings and a lot of the location-sensitive mobile results that are coming out. So it's kind of, they need to just do a killer job with their content if they want to compete at an organic level. I know that's tough, especially with home-based businesses. I tend to look for, if somebody at a conference comes up and asks me this and they're an actual small business, I'll try to look for an independent, small office space provider. In Portland, we have one called Active Space, where you can rent, say, a 200 square foot office or a 150 square foot office for like $200 a month. And those types of things, they really are going to need a physical location for long-term success in local and mobile.
Great, thanks.
All right, that's all we have time for. Thank you, David.
For sure. Thanks, Cyrus.